Hello there, everybody. Welcome to the replay on how to remember vocabulary with some mnemonic examples, hopefully with some of you live on the chat. And if you're watching the replay, you can get involved by leaving some comments down below. If you're new here, my name is Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com, where we help mature learners really unlock the vast powers of your imagination and your mind so you can remember lots and lots of information, including vocabulary from books of vocabulary if you like. And this happens to be a dictionary of slang here, and we're going to generate some mnemonic examples live just out of the top of our heads with a list of some words. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. If you're new, get subscribed, hit the bell icon, and if you're watching the replay, make use of the discussion area below, and also hit the thumbs up and let me know where in the world you are, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and how things are going with your memory techniques. So, all that said, let's get a bird's eye overview of what memorizing vocabulary is all about. Essentially what you want to do is you want to memorize the sound and the meaning, and you want to be very, very targeted that you're memorizing not every meaning under the sun, but maybe one or two, and even just focusing on one until you have the skills that would enable you to memorize more than one meaning at a time, right? So this is really, really important. And words, of course, are different. Every word is different. It may have one syllable, two syllables, three syllables, or more. And so we need to take each word on an individual basis and not generalize as if the technique is going to work the same time, as if each and every word is, somehow going to behave the same in relation to the memory techniques, because that would be a recipe for disaster. You want to be focused on all of the individual words as individual units and not treat them necessarily the same. So Sandra's here, says good evening, morning from Northern California. The sound breaks up occasionally. Sorry about that. It's too hot in the studio right now, which is closer to the thing, but I thought let's just do a live stream anyway and try to do one at a cooler time of day. So apologies for that, but if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Like Sandra, let me know where you are in the world and how things are going for you there. And let's see about, does that make sense to everybody who is able to catch this? Words have different syllables, and so we need to put ourselves in a mental state of just being able to accept that words have different numbers of syllables, and be prepared to deal with that and deal with them on a word-by-word basis just as they are, and focus on the big definitions that matter, So, and we can use different skills when we get more skilled with memory techniques to help us memorize more than one definition at a time by segmenting space in a memory palace in a particular way. So let me know if you're joining us now. Amzal is here. Amzal is in India. Thanks for saying hello. Good to see you. We're trying a different time zone also for people, and glad to have people from India. I hope to visit there one of these days. I study some of your traditions and find some of the language fascinating and wonderful to learn. So thank you for saying hello wherever you are in the world, and gonna have a great session today. All right. So when we look at different words, and we recognize that they have different syllables, and we understand that we want to work on definitions, of course, on a case-by-case basis. Then we're ready to hit the ground running. Julie's here. Hello, Julie. Good to see you. It's been a while. Great. Always good to see your name. And if you're joining us and you don't know Julie, Julie is awesome. And hit the thumbs up for Julie. Good Runner 63er is here. Aus Deutschland. Guten Tag. What time is it there? Is it morning there in Germany? Or I guess it must be. Wonderful. I haven't been to Germany for some time now. But I do have my dictionary of German slang here, and one of the words I remember from here is abgebaggert. And I remember in Germany, some people were just like, huh? They never even heard of this one. And that's one of the issues that you come across when you memorize a lot of vocabulary, is that sometimes you'll remember words that the locals don't even know. See if I remembered that right. I can't find an abgebaggert here yet. Oh, there it is, abgebaggert, yeah. Gestern war ich total abgebaggert. I love that one. But I remember my roommate was just like, huh? He'd never heard it before, and he is echt Deutsch. Sicherlich. So, 6:40 in the morning in Germany. Excellent, excellent. Kumaraguru is here from India. Excellent, welcome. So, we're not going to focus on German. Abgebaggert, Julie, it means like to be like bagged out or like totally pooped, really tired. Let's see what they say here. Burned out, dredged. I was really bushed yesterday is the English they give there. Joe is here from Bailey, Colorado. Excellent. Thanks for being here, Joe. I love Colorado. I spent a great deal of time in Fort Collins once upon a time in Colorado. I don't know if that's near Bailey, but in any case, I like Colorado. Great place. So when we think about words, which is a very good skill, everything is in words, so we want to be able to memorize vocabulary. We have those things that I mentioned that we need to account for. We need to account for a difference in syllables and the potential for multiple definitions, and we have sounds. Now there may be other things like spelling and grammatical principles. I would suggest that we just focus in the beginning, unless you already have the skills, just on sound and meaning and one meaning, and just be prepared that all the words that we account for may have different syllables. Good to see Physico here. Hello, Physico. Thanks for saying hello. If you're joining us, always say hello, hit the thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world. If it's the replay, same principle, thumbs up, let me know where you are in the world down in the chat below. Now, one of the things that you can do, which may be an advantage or a disadvantage, is to arrange your words so they all have the same syllables, right? So if you were like thinking about, let's see here, addition has 3, adjustment has 3, and then you could just get a bunch of amusement has 3 syllables. That is something like a memory technique in and of itself, right? Actual syllables, rhythm, right? And you can work in this way. Rasmuth is here. I haven't seen you for a while. Thanks for saying hello. Everything is great. How are you doing? Thanks for saying hello. Then if you wanted to take 2 syllable words, amount, account, approve, attend, like all that kind of stuff, that in itself can also be a memory device. So it's not just about rhythm, but it's also in your memory palace. You will just know that when you're doing recall rehearsal, these words are just 2 syllable words or 3 syllable words, and that in itself is a reminder of what to focus on and what you don't have to focus on, which can be very, very powerful, very powerful. And when I was doing things with German, this is one of the things I focused on, for example. And in Chinese, you don't really have that that option, because there's a different logic there, and that pretty much decides for you how many syllables you're going to be working on most of the time. Nobin is here from India. Hello, Nobin. Great to have you here. I imagine this is a pretty good time of the day for India, so please keep letting me know where you are in the world, and so on. Now, it's not a magic bullet. Nothing in memory techniques is a magic bullet. It's an assistant to remembering things faster, learning faster, having greater pleasure, gathering like and related kinds of information together, and really getting the most out of what you're doing. So that's really powerful. And think about the power of like and association of like related information as a means of reducing the amount of things you have to pay attention to and just sort of triggers. And then there's things like rhythm. So 2-syllable words, not so much. 3-syllable words, 4-syllable words. And if this ever is on your radar, memorize some rap and look at some of the real heavy hitter rappers. So Eminem, for example, he's a real wizard with 3 and 4 and 5-syllable words, and he can really arrange them. And it's not always, but you'll see that he has this real focus, a subset of skill that is with multiple syllable words, and how they're arranged. It will not give you any direct skills in your memory work, but it's something to observe, provided you're okay with the subject matter. Eminem, I'm okay with your subject matter, but it's something interesting. And so not all, like you'll see a lot of rappers, they'll really break things down to just 2 and 3-syllable words, but he'll go into the 4 and the 5. So that's really, really something to keep in mind in your practice. The role of organizing words by syllable. Count. Rasmus says, vocabulary is definitely a big weakness of mine, quite possibly the biggest when it comes to language learning. Well, thanks for sharing that. You see, this is the thing. All memory techniques use vocabulary. We memorize in words, right? Essentially what we're doing is we're taking semantic information and translating it into imagery, magnetic imagery, which means not just pictures, but feelings and scenarios, procedures, which is why we rely on procedural memory, and many, many things, many, many things. It's really quite fascinating once you get into the science. But we are in the art of vocabulary. So how do you improve your abilities with memorizing vocabulary? You memorize vocabulary. It's very simple. So what I would suggest for all of you is to get together some words and then memorize them and start to make that at least a couple times a week practice, ideally every day. And understand that if you have daily memorization practice, you're memorizing in words anyway. And I'll explain why that is so just with a simple deck of cards. So let's say that we're memorizing the 10 of clubs. The 10 of clubs is cheese, right? And cheese, because it is the number, it's the 60th card in the system that I use. And so 6 is a ch sound in the major system, and 0 is an S sound, so cheese, and like Chuck E. Cheese, right? So it's all based on words and the word parts. And even if you were to use a different kind of PAO, like Hotel Dominic or something like that, and you just had an arbitrary association, your 60 was Patton or someone like this, and I mean Mike Patton, not General Patton. That was who I was thinking of. Patton is a word. It's a name for a person, right? For several people in the world. So you're still using words at the end of the day. And the way to practice memorizing words is to memorize words. It's very, very simple. And so we're always memorizing in words, even if we're memorizing numbers. Because even if we were just using Chuck E. Cheese to memorize the number 60 and not the fact that 10 of clubs is the 60th card, well, then 60 is a word, isn't it? So it's all vocabulary. It's all words. It's all words. And in my current Sanskrit studies, what's really interesting is that one of the sort of conclusions in the teaching is that the path to freedom from thought is by understanding how to use words to free yourself from obsessive thinking. So that's very powerful indeed. It's words. So Physico says, Dr. Metivier, the question that bugs me, words are better in context or isolated to be memorized? Sorry if you already responded to that. I have arrived now. No need to apologize. You can ask your questions again and again. If I ever miss a question, just type it in again. And I mean, you can apologize if you do something bad, but this is not bad. So the question of whether it's better to memorize in context or isolate the words, here's the thing. When you're memorizing words, unless you already know the meaning of the words, you're also always memorizing the meaning of the words, which is a context. So it's unlikely to memorize out of context. Like when I memorized Apgebaggert, for example, it was in the context of that means something. So I saw Abraham Lincoln bagging a very, very tired Gertrude, right? I happen to know a Gertrude, so there you go. And she was very tired. So the meaning and the sound and the context all comes together. Then, if you are using the proper magnetic memory method, you're going to use the big 5, which then means using it in context. Reading, writing, speaking, and listening in ways that serve your memory, and then from memory, right? So you read, write, and speak and listen from memory after reading, writing, and speaking and listening to serve your memory. It's a perfect circle. So it's always context. You always need context. There's another rule of context that is so profound, which is just to simply be memorizing the information that improves your life already. So if the list of words is not improving you, improving your ability to speak a language or to be a professional in something like medicine or law or pass an exam, then it has no business being memorized. And yes, you can do exercises with information so long as it improves your life. Like this improves anyone's life who memorizes cards, because it will increase speed, it will increase the impact of the mental imagery that you create, and there's multiple uses for it. For example, getting better at a 00 to 99 PAO, which you can then use with tones in languages, right? So it's very easy to remember the tones of certain Chinese words because I just associate them with a card, or with the image for the number of the tone pattern. So 3 and 4 becomes 34, and then we can create an image that then goes with that. And then there's 2 and 1, and there's 1 and 2, and there's 1 and 4, and 1 and 3, and so on, right? So there's always an image there for that. Really powerful. So great question, but the context is always, must always be there, and then it must improve your life. So cards can improve your life for speed, for better impacting information, mental imagery rather, that you then can use better. It also helps you. Reuse memory palaces and deal with information that you're going to have to repeat in sequence. So for example, one of the things where I think that my current Sanskrit memorization project is going so easy when I have multiple words is because I'm so used to memorizing the same thing in a different order right here. So sarvam comes up in different ways, in different places. And then it might be sarvan in a different sentence because of the grammar. No problem. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. But this is one of the reasons why. Regular, consistent practice with that. And understanding that when I'm doing this, I'm not really memorizing the cards. I'm memorizing the words associated with the cards, even if those words are numbers. And the thing that you can do here is memorize the numbers in the language you're learning. And that can be a great exercise as well for the vocabulary related to numbers. So if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world and what you're doing, how you're feeling, what's going on. I see Maricella is here. Hello, Maricella. Good to see you, as always. Sandra asks, PAO, what is a PAO? Great question. So PAO is interesting. It's person, action, object. This has a long history. It's been around for hundreds of years. And I'm not sure that it started with numbers, but it's just the idea that you have a person and an action and an object that helps you remember certain things. So let's just take cards here, noting that cards are the memorization of vocabulary and a great way to improve how you memorize vocabulary. And let's just take a random one. All right, somebody type stop. I don't know if that's gonna work. No, you're not fast enough. Type, 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 you're probably driving. Anyway, we'll stop right here. So what is this, 9 of spades. So this is Tipper Gore with a tape. The tape that's used to censor albums. So Tipper is the person, and the object that she has is like this long stick of tape that says, you know, warning, graphic language, or censored. Like back in when she was doing all that stuff to help put those parental advisory stickers on albums. And so she's the person, her object is the tape, and her action is the taping. So if we then go like this and say stop anytime, and we now have the 4 of hearts, well, this is Chuck Norris, because this is 84. So this is Tipper because it's 19. T and P, right? And this is fire because it's 84, right? And so it's actually Chuck Norris with a flamethrower. So Chuck Norris and his flamethrower are the person and the object fused, and the action is shooting fire. So now Tipper is wrapping his head with the censored parental advisory tape, and he'll be burning whatever is coming next with his flamethrower. So I, as much as possible in my own practice, I try to reduce it down to a person who has an object who is doing the action. And a lot of people, the way they teach it is that these all should be built from the major method. But I think that that's not necessarily the case, because flamethrower is not built from fire. It has F in it, but as a first letter, but it's really gets far away from there. And Chuck Norris has nothing to do with fire, except for that in Missing in Action 2, he's using the flamethrower, and so on. So this is really, really important to understand. But that's what a PAO is. And if you have one of those for everything from 00 to 99, then you have a 00 to 99 PAO. You can go up to 1,000. There's an episode on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast with Florian DeLay where he talks about that. I don't really find it necessary to do that. But Joe, your stop came in, but quite late. In any case, thank you for contributing to the effort. And come on, guys, speaking of effort, we got over 20 people here and only 7 thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Tell the robots that you're enjoying this Magnetic Memory Method channel here. And that's really, really important so that the robots know, because humans are not in control of the internet, and that's a problem. So Sandra, let me know if you have any more questions around the PAO. Rasmus says, for languages that are similar in different languages but are pronounced differently, how can one keep the pronunciation separate? This is another struggle about learning vocabulary. For languages that are similar in different languages but are pronounced differently. Oh, I see. Like cognates that are pronounced differently. Let's think of some cognates here. Give me some examples. Cognates are not rushing off my tongue all of a sudden. Let's see. Cognates, wow. I must be tired. So, open and often, I guess. Well, that's a pretty different pronunciation. So I wouldn't worry about that. Yeah, you just have to give me some examples of what you mean. Let's work with what's troubling with you. Bob is here. Hello, Bob. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. Bob is an amazing guy. I think this is the first time you've been on a live stream, Bob. So good to see you. Or at least this is the first time you said hello. Really amazing. SK says hello. Sorry for the delay in joining. Not a problem, not a problem. We have no problems here. There's always, at least on Facebook, or sorry, YouTube, there are these replays. So, unless something tragic happens, we take the replay away. But this is an opportunity as a public service to get together and talk about these issues together. So let's get some cognates going, Rasmus, if you want to work on that. Oh, SK equals Sunil. Hello, Sunil. Good to see you. As in the Sunil that I know. Oh, yes, well, with the K, of course. Well, I was just looking at your episode recently. So for those of you who are not subscribed to the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, Sunil and I recently recorded an episode you're absolutely going to love with his experiences with Japanese, and also we make reference to his career with Korean and just his interest also in technology and so forth. So Wonderful, wonderful to have you here. Situation. Situation. Good one, good one. Or Swedish. Oh, Rasmus, right. Was it, you were the one with trade for tree, right? Is that right in my memory? T-R-A umlaut D. So Swedish gift is pronounced like gift, while in Danish is pronounced gift. And you know in German, gift means poison, and giftish is to be poisonous. So I would just use a different memory palace, Rasmus. If you know that the memory palace is for Swedish, and you know this one is for Danish, then there should be no problem. And if you're getting confused, then you need to be practicing better imagery. And if you need to practice better imagery, then the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass is the ne plus ultra of training on what mental imagery is all about. But at the end of the day, you want to really, really separate things in a number of senses. So first you have the division of the memory palaces, then you have the division of the imagery, then you have the actual practice of recall rehearsal, which should clean it all up at the end of the day when you also have the big five of learning. So if you are missing any of those things, then think about the big levers where the real issues are lurking. And usually the issues are in your practice and your setup and your planning and your execution and the strength of your imagery. And a lot of people are just not using the full range of the magnetic modes. This is why they're struggling. And you will always struggle if you are not tapping into all of the different modes, right? Or at least understanding it, what they are and how to tap into them. So Peggy's here, 1 a.m. in the VT. Whoa. Yeah, I knew there was a reason to stay up late. Well, thank you, Peggy, but don't do it in a way that damages your memory. Appreciate you being here, though. And it's a memory challenge to keep everybody's different screen names together, but I think I saw something from you on the Magnetic Memory Method Forum recently, if memory serves, with that username there. So Sunil says recording the podcast was a lot of fun. Yeah, we're going to try and get it out this month. I've been recording a bunch of episodes today for you all. Hope you enjoy them. And Rasmus confirms trade for tree in Swedish, but it's tray in Danish. Gift in both Swedish and Danish, weirdly enough, means both poison and married. Wow. Well, I don't know what to say other than that reveals a great deal. It's interesting. It's interesting how languages work, and there's interesting logic that you come across that you also don't want to be seduced by. And that's a challenge to vocabulary too, is sometimes we'll want to know why things work the way that they work, especially when you're looking at vocabulary in the context of sentences. And you can spend all day in the logopoia, as it's called. Translators, they sometimes talk about logopoia, melopoia, and phanopoia. And so melopoia is the sound, phanopoia is the images, and logopoia is the meaning, the logic. Bob, good to see you here briefly. Thank you for saying hello. I look forward to our strategy session coming up soon, and thanks for booking that. Known Bob for a long time. He was a person who helped out when we first were doing the math course with people. What we did is it was like a free for feedback model, where to make sure we had the most serious people, there was an upfront fee which was returned when some feedback was given, and that was a great help. And it's one of the reasons why that has been such a successful course for people, because we did it on that model. And it was really neat, because a lot of people at the end, they were like, here's all my feedback, but go ahead, keep the fee. We know what you're doing. We love your work. And that was awesome too. So it was just really one of the best courses in the masterclass because of that. And Bob was a part of that. Really huge. So glad he could pop in. Good to see him. And yeah, he's gonna be on a strategy session soon. And probably on the podcast soon because of something really exciting that he's doing. Great. Ryan's Internet Adventure, good to see you here. Do you decide to memorize a word you don't know the first time you come across it in reading, or do you wait for a second or third time seeing it in context before you memorize it? Great question. All of these things. It depends, you know. There's no one size fits all rule. You might come across a word and say, yes, I'm going to memorize that right now because that's awesome, or I need it. Or you might memorize it right now because if you're using the magnetic memory method, you don't leave things to chance. You strategize. You put things together and then you memorize it and you get it into long-term memory so that it's done. But there are some words that you'll just come across again and again, and then you'll think, yeah, that wasn't that important, but now I'm seeing how important it is, and you'll either put it into your strategy wheel, so to speak, and get it done, or you'll just memorize it on the fly. And if you can build memory palaces on the fly, you might do it that way. It's like with Rasmus here. I don't know how many months ago it was. I didn't memorize exactly the day that it came, but it was probably 6 months ago or something like this. He mentioned that the word for tree in Sweden was trade, and we just created a mnemonic example for it on the fly, like that. I had no expectation at that moment that I would ever need the word tree in Swedish. But I did it anyway, just because I like a little bit of brain exercise here and there, and so away you go. But if you missed the beginning of this replay, we talked a little bit about strategizing and some tips for strategizing your vocabulary that I think you'll find useful. Harvinder's here. Good to see you, Harvinder. I was just thinking about you today and your 77 memory palaces that you created out of dreams, because I've been thinking a lot about dreams lately. Had a really, really wild dream this morning. Ooh, kind of freaky, kind of freaky. I don't have freaky dreams very often, but this one was really freaky. Whew. I'm not sure why. Might have been something I ate. Sandra says, oh, it was something I ate. I changed something. I did a little experiment with my diet. That's why. Sandra says, do you memorize words in a certain form, comma, E? Not sure where that's going, but looking forward to more data on that. But I memorize words in the form that they're in. Julie says, whoa, memory palaces out of dreams. Yeah, Julie, you got to dive into the memory course and join us in the future when we do a dream recall intensive. So the dream recall intensive that Harvinder was part of, it was supposed to be only for a month, but we were having so much fun that we went for 6 weeks. Wow. And he's just ripping out dreams left, right, dreams also, but ripping out memory palaces left, right, and center. Because one of the things that we do is we recall our dreams and then we think about what memory palaces come to mind. So it's very, very important. Harvinder says he's drinking warm water now. We're in tune, brother. Great, great. I got all the warm water you could ever need right here. Thumbs up to drinking hot water. What we call it, or I'm not Chinese, but what the Chinese call it is Ai Kai Shui, and so that's kind of cool. So maybe Harvinder has a little memory exercise. Well, hot water is Ruo Shui, but water that has been cooked and then brought down to warmth, or allowed to become, lukewarm, a little bit hotter than lukewarm, I guess, is Bai Kai Shui. So at least that's what I understand from my wife. Sometimes she doesn't give me the full 100% definitions of things. But thumbs up for everybody who's drinking water, keeping themselves optimized. Hit the thumbs up if you're just joining us. Let me know where you are in the world. Ryan's Internet Adventure. Do you follow a particular diet for mental clarity? Yes, I do. Actually, Ryan, I was thinking I might live stream the chapter on food from my new book. And then I thought, nah, I'll do this vocabulary thing. But if I get enough thumbs up right now, I will read you the chapter from my book. It's not that long, and it's all about the diet. And it might not be done because it's just the draft, but if people right now, let me know with your thumbs up and your hell yeahs in the chat, would you like me to answer Ryan's question by sharing with you everything that I have to say about foods that improve memory and how to build a diet based on you using what's called N=1 experimentation? If that sounds good to you, I will read it. And if not, I won't. I'll spare the energy and you can read it in the book when it's ready. So far, no interest, Ryan. Sorry, so you'll have to wait for the book if we don't get some interest. Julie says, I have drastically changed my diet, going on 4.5 months. No meat, fish, dairy, refined, anything, salt, sugar, alcohol. Pretty hardcore, but I have gained a lot of clarity. That's great. That's great. So elimination is really, really powerful. And getting rid of alcohol was a huge lever for me. Joe Stedman says, hell yes. Harvinder gives a thumbs up. Ryan's internet adventure, what do you eat then, Julie? Physical says, water, delicious, also hell yeah. Julie almost lost 50 pounds, wow. Ryan says, hell yeah. Serving says, yes, please, or Sevink says, yes, please. All right. Let's see if we get a couple more. We got only 10 thumbs up. Give me some love here with the thumbs up, people. A couple more hell yes. And then we'll get into it. SK says, please do. Okay, Sunil. So the new book, I was looking a lot at my new book, and you can tell me whether this is a good idea or not. Sevink says, second yes count. Yeah, absolutely, definitely. You can tell me if this is a good idea or not. Like, I don't have to publish it this way. I'll just write it this way, because this is the idea that came to me, is that this book is going to be very, very heavy on memory techniques. But then I thought, some of this is really next level stuff. In fact, I was thinking of calling it Next Level Memory. But first, I realized that John Graham has a course called Next Level Memory, which he just told me, and I was like, oh, better change the title. But then I thought, what's the #1 criticism of Moonwalking with Einstein? And they say it's big on biography, light on actual technique. And then I thought, but part of the reason why it's so popular is because it's got this story and people love story. So how can I bring the two together? And what I essentially came up with was kind of like a mix, and it's not done yet, about halfway done, the draft. It's kind of like a mix of Moonwalking with Einstein meets 12 Rules for Life, meets the Bhagavad Gita, meets the magnetic memory method, right? So I think that it's going to be good. So we're going to talk about strategy, but we're going to have some story here and see how people like it. So this is the food chapter. I think we got enough thumbs up, although there's never enough for the robots. So keep those thumbs up coming. All right, so I'm going to refer to something called sense, which is S-E-N-S-E. You'll have to wait for the book to know what that is. But here we go. And this is rough draft. Got to work it out here. And it gets to the actual technique and, you know, step 1, step 2. But again, keep in mind that how could we have Moonwalking with Einstein meets the Bhagavad Gita, meets 12 Rules for Life, meets hardcore memory training. And this chapter doesn't really have anything to do with memory training as such, because it's just about how to purify your mind so that you can benefit from memory training. Okay, here we go. Keep your comments coming, keep your questions coming, your thumbs up coming. Get subscribed if you're not already subscribed, and we'll rock and roll. It was only after a year-long false alarm with gout and nearly breaking my back in Cairo that I learned just how much a proper diet contributes to sense. Remember, we'll teach sense in the full book. What is a proper diet, you ask? Well, that, it turns out, relies entirely on you and your chemical makeup. And to figure that out, Completing an elimination diet might be the activity that sets you free from suffering faster than years of combining memory improvement activities with anything else discussed in this book. Throw in a rotation diet lifestyle for good measure, and your entire relationship to food will be optimized for mental clarity beyond your wildest imagination. So what Julie was just sharing there is a little bit of an elimination diet style. All of this is to say that you cannot model the dietary changes I'm about to share with you in any exact way. The benefit will come from understanding the strategy behind the decisions I have made and then testing on your own, ideally with guidance from a professional. Hopefully you will choose to do so before the pain and suffering that forced me to take action in April of 2013 rubs your nose in the raw reality of physical misery thrust on you out of the blue. Because, I gotta add a sentence here, because pain is the ultimate enemy of the focus and concentration we need to use the robust memory techniques taught in this book. Now, long before I stood up from my desk during the tour with The Outside, which was my band at the time, food had been an issue. My earliest memories of eating being a miserable occasion involved the babysitter's menu. Mrs. Lang was an overweight armchair evangelist. Her husband Henry was similar, but less enthusiastic about the endless hours of Bernice Gerard and 100 Huntley Street playing every morning on their television set. While endless hymns and testimonials rolled out of the screen, my brother and I would try to sleep on their couch after our mother dropped us off at 4 or 5 a.m. on her way to work at the Royal Inland Hospital. Or, depending on her shift, we'd arrive around 5 p.m., just in time for another miserable dinner at the Lang's table. Actually, the dinners weren't that terrible. There would be canned peaches, pears, or cherries from their own trees. But I dreaded breakfast. They would buy loaves of the cheapest bread possible by the dozen and freeze them. Slices from the frozen bricks went straight into a horizontal toaster and came out soggy. Butter came from similarly old and thawed bricks, and the stomach pain from a tummy filled with soggy bread haunted me throughout the day, compounded by thawed and dried peanut butter sandwiches made using the same putrid bread. Then there were the lunches from home. Memory is not so reliable, but I don't think I'm exaggerating when I recall having nothing more than an apple to go with whole wheat crackers and slimy slices of bulk cheese. More often than not, we had carved out white and green moss portions out of the cheese to avoid waste. And I'm sure spores from those lunches live in my stomach still. I've never been a man prone to envy, but I must have coveted the expertly wrapped lunches of my friends. I remember receiving donations of fruit wraps, sometimes half a sandwich, and probably traded Wayne Gretzky hockey cards for juice boxes. Obviously, most of these items I received weren't great for the health of a growing youngster either. But it was better than starving after having thrown the putrid food I'd been given away. The only reprieve was hot dog day. A few times each year from grades 1 to 7, we took order forms for hot dogs and chocolate milk home and begged our parents for the needed funds. I did everything in my power to get at least 3 of them in my belly and used to dream about when the next hot dog day would come around. In grade 7, when the chaos in our family had fully kicked in, I had the chance to study at the Summer School of Music and take a course with Canadian brass trombone legend Rob McLeod. I'd recently landed back at home after a stint in a foster home and blah, 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 some stuff here that you can read in the book. But one day I was so famished, I could barely hold my trombone. I broke into tears when Rob McLeod asked me if I'd eaten anything. During the break, he took me to the school canteen and ordered me whatever I wanted. And guess what I ordered? Hot dogs. They didn't have any chocolate milk, so I had Coca-Cola instead. I knew from other malnourishment experiences just what a dose of sugar like that can do. I remember feeling like I'd been rocketed straight up to heaven when these substances entered my system. Perhaps the bliss is still with me, waging holy war from up in my brain with the cheese monsters still at play in my gut. There were many other scenes. All through high school, I would collapse regularly on the couch with searing gut pain. Later, an appendix removal operation led to speculations about Crohn's disease that I had to ignore after their nightmare explorations convinced me that a lifetime of suffering was better than ever submitting to a colonoscopy again. I suffered throughout university, and no wonder. As soon as I was able to feed myself, I didn't even have the remotest clue about nutrition, let alone a sense of rhythm. For a few years, I lived almost entirely on pizza, ice cream, and Guinness. The point is that all of the food difficulties that came crashing down on my ankle in 2013 have a long history. On a pause in the tour with the outside, I was working at my desk in Berlin one afternoon and happily closed the lid on my laptop after working on my memory books. I recall singing the Marlene Dietrich song, Wenn ich mir was wünschen dürfte. I had recently memorized the lyrics and was singing them with abandon to anyone who would listen. But this time I hardly got through the first line after heading out of my room when I felt a crack in my right ankle. It felt like I'd broken it and I must have gone into shock. Instead of going to the hospital, I had the brilliant idea of getting into the S-Bahn and heading to Sandra's for yet another delightful evening in the chemical bath of a brain in love. I'd met my girlfriend at the time at her birthday party in the Jagerklause. If you know Berlin, then you know the Jagerklause. A nurse with an infectiously mysterious smile, forever tipped in the direction of irony. She was surprised that I wanted her number when we found ourselves camped together the next morning in my apartment, and perhaps more surprised that we wound up spending hardly more than a few days apart for the next several years. Once at her apartment, hobbling all the way, we decided I'd go to the doctor the next day. Yet, all during the night, I kept crawling back and forth to the washroom on my hands and knees until I woke up severely distressed and burning with fever. She called the doctor, who visited our apartment and pronounced me ill with gout. He lectured me on my drinking and eating habits and stuck me with a syringe filled with cortisol. The next morning, my girlfriend secured a pair of crutches for me, and I would be on and off them for the next 2 months. At one point, I even pushed myself around in a wheelchair, which is not as fun as it looks. After hearing my story and seeing some blood, my doctor agreed with the house doctor and sent me off to a rheumatoid specialist to confirm the gout diagnosis. Before leaving my office, he gave me a prescription for allopurinol to lower the extremely high levels of uric acid in my blood. I immediately reduced my drinking, though not entirely, and not my habit of washing pills down with beer when I did drink. And I started slowly making changes to my diet. As for the band, I managed to finish the tour and play a few more local shows, but kept experiencing shocks in my hand when I would carry equipment and play on stage. The pain was so bad during the final show that I vomited into my mouth on the stage for the first time ever, and did not give I vomited for the first time on the stage. You know, like people sometimes do that when they're drunk and playing, but I actually did it because of pain. And for the first time ever, I did not give my post-show card magic performance, because usually after the show I would perform magic tricks for everybody on the tour. Over the next few months, I spent half my time on crutches. Having done intense research into gout, I was eating the best possible diet I could find. For most people, this would have been health overkill, but in my case, the pain kept getting worse and worse. Plus, I was packing on weight, which is totally absurd when you're rarely eating anything other than Mediterranean salads and vegetarian chili. Of course, my girlfriend and I did a lot of traveling despite my pain and couldn't stop ourselves from drinking ourselves into epic stupors that led to deep unrest. In Malaga, I discovered a cane in an antique shop that looked far more interesting than the medical cane I'd been using. It was black with a silver tip and made me feel like Salvador Dali to walk around with it in my hand. It didn't entirely suit my heavy metal stoner rock vibe at the time, but it wasn't out of place either. As I told my girlfriend before putting it back on the rack, deciding to upgrade my handicap jewelry, as I called it, was like marrying the disease for life. I wanted to live, so I focused on a better mental image of health and kept the cheap cane. I knew I would return to the pharmacy the instant the pain went away. When I finally cut out the drinking altogether, after another drunken row, my girlfriend's drinking did not stop. Although she tried following my lead from time to time, it was not in her to do so, and this led to more conflict. So one day, commiserating on the situation in an email to a friend, my friend replied, "Why do you keep trying to symbolically heal your father's alcoholism?" This question cut through the misery of my love life so thoroughly that only my poor health and the absence of free will can explain why my brain could not get me out of the situation the very next day. Love matters aside, when I finally saw the gout specialist, he said he could find no evidence of the condition. Back at the doctor's, he noticed redness in my cheeks, and a few questions later, he delivered his strong suspicion that what I really had was psoriasis arthritis. Great, another disease. But I'm grateful he mentioned it, because this time we found a clue that would lead to impactful change. I just had to make a detour that nearly broke the camel's back first. Ollie Richards of IWillTeachYouALanguage.com let me know in certain terms that if I wanted a comfortable place to stay in Cairo, the time was nigh. He was leaving his job with the British Embassy to focus 100% on his online language learning website. After the collision of my new dietary issues and my girlfriend's disinterest in giving up the booze, we decided to part ways. Although it was a perfect relief to finally put into action the truth my friend had revealed to me about trying to symbolically heal my father's alcoholism that had been staring me in the face since she made that statement, I had a hard time believing that I could ever wind up living without alcohol in my life. I hadn't even given it up completely myself. But I would in Israel, only 1 month after the meltdown in Cairo. And if you ever heard that episode with Jonathan Levy and I on the podcast, you hear the last time that I drank alcohol. No, it was the penultimate last time that I drank alcohol. In any case, really haven't, except for one little blitz, haven't drank since, and that's years now, years. Now, in the labyrinthian city, Cairo, of raised motorways, insane traffic, and howling prayers baked in dusty sunlight, Ollie introduced me to a driver named Hani, who I hired to take me all over the city. Terror struck that night, and I should have taken it as a sign of the trouble yet to come. I awoke to the sounds of an explosion, but with no context, put myself back to sleep with a round of Savasana. We learned the next morning, Savasana is taught in the book, by the way. We learned the next morning that the noise had been a bomb tearing apart the Italian embassy. The British consulate warned everyone not to leave Cairo, and on that cheery note, Ollie left me in the hands of Hani. Visiting the pyramids is an obvious must when in Cairo. Hani told me he could arrange a special camel ride, so after introducing me to koshery in his favorite restaurant, we landed in a strange perfume shop. I shouldn't have been eating that, as good as it is. After paying a price that preyed upon my gullibility and general lack of concern for fairness in business, I hopped on the back of a camel and entered the ghetto of corridors that leads visitors into the desert. For some reason, access to the Sphinx was closed, so I saw it for only a few seconds through a portal to the right. One of my guides rode a horse, while the other tugged on the camel's rope, speeding us by. Too stunned by the mass of humanity crammed into the pathways to even try and make memory palaces from the journey, I settled into studying the paranoia preventing me from enjoying the ride. The entire time I was wondering when we would be entering the same kind of portal I had seen when we passed by the Sphinx. We seemed to be getting deeper into the kind of poverty-stricken area where gullible people like me wind up getting stabbed to death in cul-de-sacs. But after a few more twists and turns, the desert opened before us. To my right, a long wire fence separated the dunes from the flat field where the pyramids stood in the distance. We passed countless other tourists on camels with their guides. All was well, until we started making our way back. The guide, with sufficient English enough to speak with me, had started calling me Canada Dry. "You want to take the horse back, Canada Dry?" Everything in my gut told me to say yes. And yet, something else in me reasoned that I would probably never ride a camel in Egypt again, so I hopped back up in the saddle against my own inner wisdom. I was hardly 1 minute back in the saddle when I heard, "You want to go fast, Canada Dry?" My eyes turned with a huge no emerging from my mouth, but it was too late. The guide's whip came down hard on the camel, and it bucked me to the ground. I fell hard on my hip and had to verbally fight the guides not to try and move me. I was sure I'd broken my back and thanked my lucky stars when I saw the massive stone next to my head. I'd landed hard, but it could have been a lot harder. When I finally felt ready to stand, I still had to verbally fend the guide off of trying to crack my spine back into place. It was my hip more than anything that had been harmed, and the shock to my system created a vast inner stillness of gratitude as I hobbled back in the direction of the ghetto. The sun was descending rapidly, so I decided to get on the horse and we rode back as slowly as I had strength to demand. Most of my verbal resources went into demanding that the guides not beat or starve the camel. When they finally got me back to the perfume shop, I told them sternly that it was the guide's fault, not the camel's, and strangely gave in to their requests for a tip. After Hani apologized profusely about the guides he arranged for me and got me back to Ollie's, I settled in for a long week of laying mostly on my back to heal. And since I had nothing else to do, Ollie challenged me to make a course out of the ability to memorize hiragana and katakana, which I had demonstrated to him in a pub, and so I did. But there would be no healing because the shock to my system sent the psoriasis arthritis into overdrive. This is the part of the story where the term hit rock bottom comes into full effect. Now I'll spare you the full gory details and just say that psoriasis wounds opened on my back and led to us throwing away most of the bedding and my clothes before I left for the airport and headed back to Berlin. Ollie took me to a pharmacy for an ointment that helped somewhat, but it was the worst physical situation my body had ever seen. Although I did manage to get out and see a bit more of Cairo and even Memphis at great risk, despite strict orders not to leave the city, which is a thrilling tale for another time, I spent most of my remaining days researching my condition and making the course on memorizing hiragana. I belonged to a business mastermind at the time called Next Level Marketing, run by a fellow memory improvement trainer named Ryan Levesque. A health coach posted a compelling dietary post in our discussion group. Let me correct something here. Okay, so yeah, this is in the group, and thanks to the timing, I just happened to see this post in the waterfall of ideas that was constantly flooding the forum threads. One thing led to another, and I found myself on a call with Cliff, a charismatic British fellow with some clear sales experience. He explained a number of things to me that snapped into place with some of the general diet information I'd been discovering and more specific N=1 approaches I would pick up from Jonathan in Tel Aviv. But I told Cliff, as he described how his team would analyze my fluids, we had better start after I get back from London, because in addition to visiting Jonathan in Tel Aviv, I was booked for trainings in the UK, and despite my condition, had no intention of missing any of them. If you want to get this problem sorted, Cliff said, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. You just get us the samples, and we'll get them into the labs. And so, after laying out a huge amount to Cliff for his guidance out of my misery, so it went. Back in Berlin, assisted by a friend visiting me from Vancouver, I found a private lab that could withdraw the blood. He watched throughout our visit as my condition grew worse, going from lab to lab. Often within minutes of eating at a restaurant, my cheeks would develop sores, and the pain in my joints put me squarely back in the seat of a taxi and on my way home. In London, I delivered yet more fluids with instructions for sending them by courier to Poland, with more fluids going to Arizona. And true to Cliff's word, I received supplements at hotels in London and Manchester and some other places. I have to think about where they were, but as hokey as it sounded to me, and it still sounds a bit hokey now, the purpose of these supplements had an immediately noticeable effect. Of course, I thought about the placebo effect, but as recent researchers like Ted Kapchuk have suggested, I also could have had a lot of COMT in me, C-O-M-T. This is an enzyme that Kapchuk thinks may explain why some people respond better to healers than others. His work also suggests that placebo and drugs do not involve separate processes, one psychological and the other physical, that add up to the overall effectiveness of the treatment. Rather, they may both operate on the same biochemical pathway, the one governed in part by the COMT gene. Either way, after a few days of supplements and small dietary changes, I felt on top of the world. Ni hao, ni hao. Nina, how are you doing? Good. So, are you guys enjoying this, or what? We're going to get to the actual way that you do this, but here we go. So, yeah, after a few days of the supplements and small changes, I felt on top of the world. My energy shot through the roof, and I told Cliff I was concerned because I suddenly felt aggressive. He speculated that my body probably had not received the amount of nutrients I was receiving for a very long time. By changing the acid levels in my stomach, at least theoretically, and clearing out some of the creatures they had discovered in my gut, suddenly I was, again theoretically, being fed after a long period of starvation. And it makes sense, even though it's theoretical. Cliff's program included some reading, largely for shifting in my mindset. I suffered through what I felt were some clearly bogus books, but did devise the habit of meditating my gratitude after eating. Now, this practice wasn't spelled out in any of the books in particular, but emerged from my existing gratitude and meditation practices based on the general ideas that my thoughts about food contributed to their physical integration into the body. Now, I still feel that this practice works at some level, and feel very grateful for the nourishment that I receive every day in a very practical way, so it makes sense to practice gratitude about food. But the fact is that not all the gratitude in the world does not negate the effects of foods that do not gel with my system. So if I eat stuff that I shouldn't be eating, being grateful about it doesn't reduce its impact. So after Cliff received and analyzed the full results of my fluids, I received a new meal plan. I started it as quickly as possible and saw even greater results. Now, although the suggested elimination diet will likely seem extreme to many people, when you experience the levels of suffering I was in, it's all just crazy enough to make sense. And since I've always had an in for a penny, in for a pound personality, I dove straight in. The report I received and the plan I worked with came in the form of a LEAP Immunocom report. LEAP stands for Lifestyle, Eating, and Performance. I still have the documents and carry the card I received with its summary in my wallet, and it has been tremendously useful. The report is not meant to be a magic bullet. Rather, it helps you decide which foods are the most likely sources of your suffering, brain fog, and other issues. I'm going to add this: brain fog and other issues that may include strange behaviors and thoughts that impede your progress with memory techniques. Because probably many of you who struggle with memory techniques need to look at your diet. So, using a rotation principle, following the elimination diet, you drill deeper. And you can drill as deeply as you want to go by progressively removing and adding foods and keeping a food diary to help make sense of the data. And what matters is that it's your data. You won't get that from any medical professional. You'll just get generalizations. So I persisted for 6 months with Cliff's help and now eat very close to the same diet I discovered throughout this process. My wife helps manage it by creating meal plans that follow the principle and removing foods when my food journaling and other observations tell me something has to go. We even have a picture that we've created of an entire month of food that'll be in the book. Most recently, we completely removed chicken because I was feeling apocalyptic for about half an hour after eating it on a regular basis. Now, apocalyptic is a word I heard Jordan Peterson use in discussing his own diet, and it's not a bad one. Depending on the food, I will feel like yelling, physically lashing out, or perhaps jumping off the balcony. Perhaps even with my smartphone, live streaming the journey on YouTube. Just like weird ideas come to you. So suicidal ideation can last for hours, and I burned up hours of my life thinking about bizarre methods for combining a noose with the door handle, amongst other gruesome endings. In Night Falls Fast, Understanding Suicide, K. Redfield Jameson suggests that a vast number of suicides occur on a whim, and I cannot help but wonder if it's not so much a snap decision, but rather a history of food-induced melancholia meeting a particularly rajasic food. Rajas is a word I first encountered in Gary Weber's Happiness Beyond Thought. In this book, he talks about keeping a food journal and suggests that mental peace can be assisted by seeking out sattvic foods. Whereas rajasic foods are said to create a lot of energy at the expense of peace of mind, sattvic foods calm the mind. Then there are tamasic foods that leave you feeling dull and possibly moody or suicidal. Even though the eating life cannot be squeezed into 3 tubes so easily for all people, if you put some thought into these categories and test the side effects of what you eat accordingly, you will almost certainly be rewarded. And that's the logic behind N=1 elimination and rotation diets. The foods that cause people like me to suffer excruciating impulses despite loving life might be peace-inducing for you. It doesn't matter what anyone else's list of quote-unquote sattvic foods says, because raw apples have been one of the worst culprits for me. The trick is in completing these diets over the long term in order to observe meaningful patterns, and then you might find that you can eat apples anyway so long as you cook them, which is my case. I'm going to add this here. Such as baked apples are fine for me. Added to the complexity, you have the effects that mixing foods can create. As lunatic and control freakish as it might seem to an outsider, I still like to have most of my food separated on the plate. Carrots are separated from the peas, and garlic should be prepared separately from the salmon and added as a garnish later, not fused together during the cooking process. So here's how to get started. 1, do a full analysis of your current diet. Be brutally honest and use your memory journal to chart out everything you're eating. Some items will obviously not be conducive to a healthy lifestyle, but I suggest not judging the foods or even removing them right away. Just let yourself become aware of the status quo. And some things will obviously be obvious to you that you need to remove, like ice cream and pizza and all this crap, right? 2, create an action plan and commit to it. There are different ways to proceed and different ways to make the commitment, but we know that these steps matter to experiencing transformation in life. Allow the plan and your commitment to emerge in stages. As I hope to have shown in this chapter, my own transformation not only appeared through consistently taking action and letting observation guide future actions, but my journey will never end. We truly are built of the food we eat, and we must monitor our progress on a continuum with no end game so long as our bodies need nourishing. The rules that govern human bodies and how your body interprets them are also subject to change as you age or even just move around. For example, after moving to Australia, this style of plaque I'd never seen before started building plaque castles around my dental implant. The best my dentist can tell is that Australia has changed the nature of the saliva in my mouth in combination with possible regional food and water differences in terms of minerals and the like. So things will change. 3, If you take the results with a grain of salt and not expect a magic bullet, I believe the leap blood analysis I invested in is worth every penny. Look into the science behind it and learn more about what N equals experimentation means. It means you are the data that matters. Your body really does interpret the rules that govern all bodies on the planet, and these differences matter. You just need to get more involved in the experiments that help you read the data and create better maps for exploring what to fix and how. Prioritize making the changes that seem most likely to help, even if your favorite foods are involved. It might be difficult to believe now, but a lot of what you think you like to eat will become unpalatable to you once cellular regeneration has disentangled you from it. 4. Make food part of your gratitude, journaling, and meditation. I include food and water almost every day in my list of 10 things I'm grateful about on paper. I meditate after meals more often than not and let myself mingle quietly with the new inhabitants of my body. You wouldn't invite a new friend into your home without some small talk and a quick tour, would you? Why do we do it with food when we introduce it into our bodies? Welcome it in and show it around. Let me add something here. All right. 5, be all in on the processes you create for life. Once you've felt the benefits of testing and retesting your diet, you likely won't want to go back. But because constant change is a reality, it's important to not become dogmatic or fanatical about even the most stabilizing dietary patterns you land upon. Chicken didn't bother me for a long time, but then suddenly it did. This is likely due to the accumulation of chemical markers in the body. Maybe I'll bring it back in the future, and it will be fine for a time, and who knows what has to go next. But peace of mind is worth the absence of even the most favorite food. In order to buy back more peace of mind. What matters is consistency with circular testing, or with the circle of testing and observing as a process. And if you fall down at any point, the depth and consistency of practice will make it easier to get back on the horse. Speaking of falling down, a lot of people get very curious about how I manage to stick with my diet both in everyday life and while traveling. In everyday life, there's not much of an issue. Most of the food other people eat at restaurants seems disgusting to me now. It's not only practically associated with pain through experience, but the more I connect through deliberate acts of assemblage with thought through the unique field, the more absurd human food practices seems. Yet, it's important not to judge and be satisfied with the peace I've created for myself and not let judging other people ruin that peace. That can be difficult though, because often the consequences of someone's diet comes into relief when they hear about the discipline I've brought to mine and the rewards it helps me reap. In other words, talking about my clean habits makes them feel guilty about their bad habits. But one can only live by example while also being aware of the pain that living by example can create in others, if only temporarily. Then there is the matter of temptation. The thing that gets me the most can only be described in one word: chocolate, usually in the form of chocolate ice cream. Now, I give in to this about once or twice a month and simply accept the consequences when I do. I've noticed over time that by being realistic about this temptation and not forbidding it, my interest in cashing in on the freedom I've created grows less and less. In terms of traveling, I do my best. I show restaurant staff my Leap card and deal with the consequences of not being able to monitor every little last thing. My skin will break out and I will need to breathe through the odd spike in behavioral impulses. Knowing why the problem exists is half the battle, and I look forward to being back in environments I have greater control over so I can sit and memorize Sanskrit in the morning and have peace. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. So that's the first draft of this chapter. There's some things that I need to add and change, which I see now. So I will do that, but thank you for going through that, and I hope that answers your question, Ryan. And I see you guys are having a lot of chats here. If you're just joining us and you have no idea what I was doing there, the question of diet came up, and since I just finished the first draft of the chapter on foods that improve memory, there's going to be more. Going to add some of the stuff about like the exact foods there. Basically, it comes down to walnuts, salmon, green tea, blueberries, and that's about it. As being things you want to add, but the principle is to take things away. Rather than what you're going to add, because, you know, for example, walnuts, I can't add them, but taking them away has reduced a huge amount of pain. So really the whole point is that brain fog and people struggling to concentrate to memorize vocabulary, which was the announced topic today, a lot of it's just that they're not in any kind of mental space to be able to benefit from the memory techniques because they can't concentrate. All right, so let me see if we got these chats here. You guys are talking about what you eat. That's great. Love when you guys are conversing with each other. So, Julie says, do I have a title? Yeah, the book has a title, but I haven't announced it yet. No title for the chapters yet. Ryan says, I think it's so interesting how people believe so strong about diets that are so different from each other. Well, that's because they're basing things on belief, and we need to base things on evidence, and that's what n=1 is all about. n=1 is about evidence based on your situation. It's not about developing beliefs. It's about finding and following the evidence. And this is one of the major themes in the book, finding and following the evidence based on your existing situation. Physical says, Doctor, since we're talking about memory and language learning, some ideas on memorizing the IPA. Yes, let's cover that. So, vocabulary, back to vocabulary. Great. So, what are your specific questions, Physical, about memorizing the IPA? I think that if you know the magnetic memory method, you probably know all that you need to know. But if you have something that is a chart or a list and so forth, what you're essentially going to need to do is you're going to need to figure out how to organize it onto in such a way that you can actually get it into memory palaces if you want to use memory palaces for that purpose. So, for example, if you're going to look at the consonant release diacritics and all that sort of stuff, then I just make a memory palace just for that and then figure it out. Then if you want to go to some other part of this, just break it down. Break it down. That's really the answer to the question. So hope that helps. Julie says, I really like that you're sharing your life experiences in the upcoming book. Yeah, I mean, it's a hit or miss. Some people are going to hate it. Other people are going to be like, it's awesome. But I don't want the, like, I mean, I think when I read a lot of books that are about what this book is about, you know, you don't necessarily want a bunch of story. And I get that criticism of, for example, Moonwalking with Einstein, even though I think it's an incredible book. But I also read it as a person who knew memory techniques. But someone who doesn't know memory techniques, I don't know. Anyway, we got a lot of work to do in how to organize the book and how soon we should get into the memory techniques and how much story should be there or not. Maybe it will turn up into 2 different books. I don't know. All right, Hashir says, he's here from Karachi, Pakistan. Good to see you, Hashir. And you say, great job, Anthony. Thank you, Hashir. Physical says, Dr. Metivier rocking on the descriptions, the poetry of things. I am very touched. My diet was kind of the same. I do feel that our lives in the past were very like. Great. That's awesome. Rasmus says, I have to say the biggest obstacle regarding vocabulary learning is beating myself up and calling myself names after I fail to recall some words. So the biggest obstacle isn't memory later. Yeah, Rasmus, I used to do that stuff too, man. And diet, really getting a hold of diet and fixing that has been huge for getting rid of that stuff. I would really seriously look into that. Physical says, bad food giving suicidal thoughts. Yeah, well, it's true. I've been punished a lot, and it just disappeared when I got my diet. Like, literally disappeared. Ali's here. Hello, Ali. Good to see you. I agree, she says, that food and diet can affect you mentally and emotionally. Sunil says, really good. We'll look forward to reading it. Great. Julie says, you show restaurants your card. Sounds good, Anthony. Thank you for reading the draft. Yeah, I have the actual results all condensed onto a card, and I just say, do not have any of this on my plate. And it's hit or miss. Joe says, thank you. I've been experimenting with raw honey. It's really amazing for my health and memory. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I did some stuff with honey, but the sugar kind of gets to me. So now Judy gets it. Yeah, I'll put a note to have an image of my card in there. Finding this place to put a note. I'm not going to use my precious memory techniques to memorize my to-do list on here. But yeah, it might seem weird in a memory improvement book, but unfortunately not many memory improvement books actually have this, and it's so obvious over the years to me that you need to look at this, because probably if you're struggling with some of the steps, it's really going to come down to changing your diet, sleep, exercise, and that'll be huge. I've shared that card before, actually, on a previous YouTube video, so you can look at the history there. Sandra says, what about scripture memorization course you mentioned in your survey? When will that happen? So Sandra, good question. I'm not sure that the survey results warrant that, but I'm going to ask a few more people in a few more places. And if you stay tuned for, I think it'll be this week's podcast, then I'll share more about that, but that'll be on the podcast. And I've recorded some more of the data around that, but thanks for asking. Rasmus says, suicidal thoughts because of diet is really scary. Yeah, well, where else would it, I mean, when you think about it, at least in my own history, where else would it have come from? I mean, there's congenital issues that could certainly lead to depression and so forth. But in my whole experience, I think it's all been food the entire time. All my barriers have come from food. And we really just know that top performers, they're really involved in their diet. So Rasmus says, I've had a lot of suicidal thoughts, but it's been due to a medieval country that will silence me if I ever try to express my true thoughts. But I'm in the process of kicking it out of my life. Well, yeah, I mean, that can be a factor too. If you don't feel free, that could be a factor. But hey, you're here on YouTube, so something's going right somewhere. But I'd still look at your food. Look at your food, really test it. You could be free. And I'm so glad that Jordan Peterson is also talking about it. I've been talking about it for years on the podcast, off and on. And, I know that the audience is like, give me the memory techniques. Snore, not the food stuff. But it's huge. It is the fundamental thing. So, really important. And if you're suffering, just get help. You just got to keep on asking until you find the help that you need. It's really important. All right, so unless there are some more questions about vocabulary and the IPA or whatever, it's pretty simple. Just break it down as always. Make sure that you are, you're just following the fundamentals. If you don't have the free course, always do the free course and make sure you know the fundamentals. it's just a powerful thing to know the fundamentals and follow them. And if you don't, you just got to revisit the fundamentals. This is one of the biggest things in life that so many people don't understand, is that if you have a barrier that's standing between you and the task, then the barrier is your task. Solve that barrier. And often one of the biggest things is that you just simply don't understand enough because you haven't paid enough attention to the training that gives you the skills that you want. So just go back to the training, revisit it. It's really just that simple. It's nothing hugely stressful or straining about that simple logic. So there you go. Vocabulary is not only really the easiest skill, but it's also the most important skill that you'll ever have, because all information is in words. So this is really, really important to understand this. All the information that you're going to memorize is in words. And if you don't have that handled, then you're going to be in trouble. So learn how to memorize words. Physico says, I'm not eating sugar, dairy, and fat. What can I do, Dr. Metivier, to change with limited resources, money, and options about the food I want to eat? Well, as I just shared in this book, keep a food diary first. Make sure that you have a good sense of the honest picture of the diet that you're working on. And actually, just keeping diaries in general are really good. Like keeping a memory journal of your activities will just help you keep in mind the honest results of the status quo that you're in. Because a lot of people, they're just not honest to themselves. And if you're memorizing vocabulary and you're not keeping track of it in a journal, then you're not really getting the full benefit of the actual status quo of your practice. And then that can make you feel like you should be getting more results when you're not actually engaged in the activities that you should be in, right? So if you have an actual picture, you can encourage yourself to do more by charting the journey along the way. It's really, really important. And also then you have like a place for your memory palaces. You have a place for your vocabulary list. You have a place to test what you're doing. Well, I wouldn't have my vocabulary list in there in that way. I would have the list of what I've tested. So this is the source of the vocabulary, and then the memory journal is where I write it out. Then I take this and compare against the record. Really, really important. All right. Joe says, the fundamentals work great for me. I was able to memorize the alphabet backwards in 20 minutes. Awesome. Excellent. That's great to hear. Rasmus says, well, it was about living with dignity. Who wants to live a lie? I'd rather not be here than live a lie. I can get that. I understand that. But I'm trying, and should I ever succeed, I'll use this pain as a gift in the sense that I'll study to become a psychologist to make sure no one else suffers from depression. In fact, I learn languages because of this. Sweden and Denmark might become my home country in the future. If you want that to be, I'm confident you can make it that way, and you have a great mission. Many a great mission has come from pain, and mine certainly has. And Physico has some good words for you. You know, I wanted to be a psychologist too back in the day. And in many ways, that's what I am, a psychologist of memory, a scientist of memory. Memory, and you know, the good thing about memory is that it is your psychology. And you are a psychologist of your own memory. And the more that you dive into it and allow your memory to be your guide, the faster and further you will get, and the more benefits you will reap because you are a student of your own memory. Kyle is here, says, I'm studying X-ray photos. How can I use magnetic memory to recognize and memorize little differences in each photo? I'm a member of the masterclass too, if there's a section I should refer to. Kyle, yeah, okay, interesting. That's an interesting one. So, look in the FAQ section at some of the things. See if something there matches with diagrams. There's one with a skull there, and there's a number of FAQ section things that will help you. But let me see what you're looking at too. So I'm not exactly sure. I've been long fascinated with X-rays and what exactly it is that they're noticing there. So that's an interesting issue, and maybe we can make something together out of that since you're in the masterclass. Let me know more about what it is that's going on there. Because if it doesn't already relate to what we've said there, then we can figure out how to relate it. But the one that has the skull diagram is probably one of the closest that I would recommend, just eyeballing it. So thanks for that question, and let's figure that out for you. But I really need to see what it is, so you can always email me some images. And for those of you in the masterclass, if you haven't logged in for a while, there's now a little button there for questions. And if you use that, that's better than email, because that helps organize the quote-unquote tickets. That helps us create even better optimizations to the masterclass. So Julie says, I only realized through a food diary and systematically removing foods that I was addicted to certain foods, and I could only remove the addiction by removing the food. Yeah, you'll learn so much from journaling. Even if you don't make any changes, you'll learn so much. Journaling your diet, journaling your vocabulary journey, journaling whatever it is you're doing. So Ryan asks, have I read The Mind Illuminated? Doesn't ring a bell, but it sounds like a cool title. Let me look it up. A Complete Meditation Guide. No, I haven't read this. Looks good. Thank you for mentioning it. Great. Someone says it's the best book on meditation they have come across. Wow. Those are high words. The best book of meditation I've come across is Happiness Beyond Thought, which is where I came across the idea of memorizing Sanskrit, which, speaking of vocabulary, is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So, Ryan asks, any meditation books that you recommend? Yes, Happiness Beyond Thought. I think it's the ultimate meditation book ever, because it's really the most N=1 book that is also involved in memorizing vocabulary or Sanskrit phrases, and really focusing on words as being a means of dissolving words, essentially. If your mind is filled with all kinds of words and ideas and stuff, well, the suggestion there to memorize words to help deal with that is great. So one of my favorites, I started memorizing the Upadesa Saram, which is Karturagniya Parapayute Phalam Karma Kimparam Karma Tajadam Kurate Mahodadal Patanakaranam Phalamashashvatam Gati Nirodhakam. And what that's saying is, you don't control the laws of the universe, and every action that you put into the vast ocean of karma, let's say, only requires you to make more actions. And this is like super amazing to meditate on and reflect on, because when you go and you do something expecting a result, we know that expectation is the quickest path to suffering. So if you let go of the expectation of an outcome, then you let go of the suffering yet to come from the actions that you were about to take. So it's very powerful. J.A. is here in the house. Good to see you. It's been a while. Glad to see you in sunny Australia from frozen Canada. Yes, it must be frozen there indeed. Ooh. Well, thank you for saying hello. Ryan says, thanks a lot. New to meditating, 30 minutes a day, and it's honestly been changing my life. Excellent. Well, there's going to be a number of memory meditation exercises in the new book. Stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed here, get subscribed. Get subscribed over at magneticmemorymethod.com so that you get notifications about the new book when it comes out. You're not going to want to miss it. And thanks everybody for the kind words here about the chapter that I read for you. Maricella says, thanks for sharing your interesting experiences. I will listen to the replay tomorrow. I have insurance done to post. I practiced Q&A insurance yesterday. I have events to assist this week I want to share. Thank you, Maricela. Always grateful to see you. You're one of the greatest mastermind members, masterclass and mastermind, always showing your support, always taking action, learning these techniques. Excellent, excellent. Really wonderful. So great to see you all active too here in the chat. Jay says, roll up the rim to win. Yes, yes. I haven't seen one of those for years, and I can't say that I'm in a rush to see them again, but oh my God. Canadians. Does anybody else here know the roll up the rim to win? I like how the Germans, some of the Germans, roll their R's too. Like on the radio, you'll sometimes hear, Richtig! Du hast gewonnen, when they do the contests. And that rolling is at the back of your tongue instead of the front. Richtig! Anyway, the first time you ever hear it, Richtig! The first time you do it successfully, it's awesome. And you know, at the microscopic level, that a lot of Germans do it all the time. Psycho Mistro is here. Good to see you. Thanks for saying hello. Hello, hello, hello. Rasmus says, thanks, Anthony. Thank you. Well, it looks like we're getting some comments coming in on the podcast. Excellent, excellent. Really appreciate everybody when they put their comments on the podcast and the blog and on the replays of these videos and the dedicated videos that we do. Always, always great. Always great. Really appreciate that. All right. So, on the rolling, says Physico, it's fun to do. So fun to do that I accidentally forgot one day how to not roll the R. Lord Fred Plus says, hey, I remember you. Well, good to see you, Lord Fred Plus. I'm glad you remember me. Thanks for saying hello. Hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. Let's do some mnemonic examples because I promised that I was gonna. And we've just been having too much fun to do mnemonic examples. So I gave a bunch of ideas at the beginning, so if you watch the replay, those will help you out. But I had this huge list of words here, and just thinking about ideas, images, and so forth. Feel free to play along in the chat, in the discussion here, if you would like, and if not, fine. But think of the word account. What would be your image for account? I was thinking instantly of the Count from Sesame Street. Remember him? And so, do we really need to have an additional AC for him? Well, if so, we could have a air conditioner smashing down on his head. Account, you know? And what is he doing there? Maybe he's doing some accounting with a Rechner. So there, account. So we have account from Sesame Street. One, two, three. And then the next word, addition. What could we do for addition? Well, that's very interesting. I know a couple of people who have ADD, and that would be something to start with. Ishin. I have a friend named Sinishin. His last name is Sinishin. So he could be getting beaten up by my friend with ADD while doing addition. How about adjustment? Ooh, adjustment. So many people probably know a person named Justin, but probably a lot of people don't know a person named Justman. So you could have maybe, you know, Metallica and Justice for All, or just the Statue of Justice, right? And she could be slicing a advertisement for mints in half. Adjustment, right? Something like that. What about advertisement? Okay, so we could still have our friend with ADD, or we could have an advertisement itself. But what about vert? Well, we could have someone doing something vertical, like on a skateboard, and they might have these eyes that are being attacked by mints on their eyes. Wow, this is fun. Great brain exercise. Having a lot of fun here. What about agreement, right? Well, AG. Thinking about, I took agriculture 11 in high school. It was kind of a weird course. Only in Canada, probably. We learned all about the different cuts of meat and how to farm and all this jazz. So I could think of her, that teacher. And Mrs. Sanderson was her name. Great memory palaces come out of this exercise too, because I don't think I've ever used her classroom as a memory palace. In fact, I haven't, but now I will. Haven't actually used that high school very much. Wow. There's a lot of that high school I haven't used. Boom. So chalk it up with another couple of memory palaces here just from this exercise. And you think right now, as you go through your own little ideas that come up and use the chat to participate, think of how they connect to memory palace ideas, and you can render forth different memory palace ideas. So agreement. So agriculture class 11, Mrs. Sanderson there. Pretty sure that was her name. Maybe she's getting greedy about mints. Agreement, right? Now greedy is kind of a concept, so we need to give it a concrete sort of thing. So maybe she's got this, I want mints, give me the mints. Maybe she's, who's the greedy guy from Sesame Street? I guess the Grouch, or yeah, Oscar the Grouch, right? Or maybe the Grinch. Maybe the Grinch. Yeah, Grinch is better because it starts, well, Grouch and whatever. I mean, you just play with it, right? Because we're trying to get sound and meaning together. All right, so those are some mnemonic examples for you. Let's see what you guys got. So, J.A. says, okay, there's the mnemonic, the Canadian Tire Money guy, Alexander. Sandy McTire counting all his money. Alex, oh, that's right, I remember that guy. I remember Canadian Tire Money. Oh, man. Oh, do they still have that? Oh, my God. That guy was hilarious. Physical says a flyer that has bank written in it. Okay, bank account. J.A. says curling his way and rolling his R's to the bank. Yeah. Physical says the Bieber guy is Justin. He is a celebrity. Yeah. Rasmus says AG in the periodic table of elements is the symbol for silver. Nice. Yeah, there you go. Only in Canada, you say. Pity. I'm not sure if I get that reference, but maybe, oh, maybe the people around the world don't know this. Kyle says, just curious, after learning all the memory techniques, do you ever still struggle learning anything? Or do you feel like you can learn anything you set your mind to? Thanks for that question, Kyle. No, I can't imagine that there's anything I couldn't learn if I set my mind to it. And it's just a question of how would the memory techniques apply? Now, the caveat there is, would I bother to memorize this or that thing, right? And that's something to really be considered. So, yes, you could, but would you bother? So, I think of this a lot. Because I sometimes think about going back to school, maybe to get another BA or, heaven forbid, another PhD or a third MA. And then I think about, like, what would warrant doing that as opposed to just following my bliss. Now I want to learn Sanskrit. I have no problem memorizing it. I mean, I've got pages of it in my head now. And I want pages more. So I just focus on that. And at first I looked at it, to be honest, and I'd be like, oh, this is a lot. But once you get into it, it's fine. So one of the big problems is just getting started. And how do you do it? Create the memory palaces that support the volume of information, and then just dive in. And let the process create the myelin in the brain, because you show up consistently enough to do it, which is very, very important in habit formation, the actual chemical myelin, and then allow it to have dopamine, because you rig the game to create these quick victories that create dopamine, so that you have this steady flow of myelin and dopamine in the brain. And that's part of why top performers keep on performing. It's because they have rigged the chemical system of the brain to work in their favor. Really, really simple, easy, important, and fun. to do it in this way. And so, yeah, I think there could be anything, but there is the caveat of like, it has to be linked to improving my life in a way that I can then translate that improvement to others. Because there's nothing worth learning that isn't in a community, that isn't assembled with other people. And I find this absolutely 100% must be there. So ultimately it doesn't really matter to have the feeling of, yeah, I can learn anything, unless it ticks the boxes of purpose and a perfect circle between myself and others. And this is a problem also, like we talked a lot about food being a barrier to people focusing and concentrating and being able to use memory techniques, but also vision and needing, actually legitimately needing and wanting what it is that you're memorizing. If you don't have those things in place, you're going to be in trouble, because you're not going to get the myelin and the dopamine, right? It's got to be linked to a purpose. So there's this like, start with why, or find your why, which sounds so hokey and goofy and so forth. But we are dependent upon it because we are dependent upon the neurochemistry of it all. We really do need the dopamine and the myelin. And so you just rig the game in your favor, and you do it through purpose. Purpose. Sophia says, great practice, thank you. Well, thank you, Sophia, for saying that and being active. Really appreciate it. JA is off. We'll check this later. Thanks always for your work and encouraging us in our memory work. My pleasure, JA. Good to see you. Really nice to always have you here. And thumbs up. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. Well, gonna go back to my little memorization projects here and find the most ridiculous words that I can find. I love books filled with words, and I hope you do too. Man, oh man, I know that one already. So many wonderful words to learn. Wonderful, wonderful words. The world is made of words, and use those words to set yourself free. So listen, everybody, thank you for being here today. And if you were here for that book chapter, let me know what you thought, either on a note on the replay in the discussion below, or send me an email. I'm easy to find, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Coming up on the podcast this week, we've got some great information for you and some updates that you won't want to miss, so stay tuned for that. Previous podcast episodes always there for you. If you want to dive in, the blog has lots of material over at magneticmemorymethod.com, and we're going to have a great time as we go into the future in the great mnemonics renaissance to keep you and your mind wonderfully, wonderfully magnetic. Physico says, thank you, doctor. Always good to hear you. Always good to have you here, Physico. Appreciate your interest and your involvement. And keep it flashy. Having fun, as always. And if you like this kind of thing where we just throw out some words and create some mnemonic examples on the fly, make sure that you let me know that you are hitting all those thumbs up, that you're leaving comments on the videos, and let me know what you'd like to see more of, because we could do some more dedicated boot camps where you guys can all type in your mnemonic examples yourself and get yourself practicing. The only way you're ever going to learn these skills is by doing. You can think about it until you're blue in the face, and that'll help. You do want to strategize. You do want to theorize. You do want to get integrated at the level of theory and strategy, and it's very, very important. But it's a supplement to action, and action will create better theory, which creates better action. And it's got to be a perfect circle. Perfect circle. So you got to interpret what you're doing and use theoretical tools in order to make sure that you're doing this at the highest possible level that you can, because time is short and facts are fleeting. And you can have many, many, many of them. So Sandra says, yes, please repeat the practice and examples. All right, we'll see what we can do. And thank you for your question about the scripture workshop that I am planning. And we'll see how that goes. And for those of you who are in the mastermind, I'll see you in the Memory Dojo later this week. Always look forward to those sessions and refining that. I know Maricella is usually there, and Harvinder is usually there, which is awesome. And keep on rocking. Keep on rocking. If you have the masterclass and you need the mastermind, let me know, and we'll arrange that for you. And until we have a chance to speak again, just keep using your memory, keep on going on mental adventures, and keep yourself magnetic. Thanks, everybody. It's great meeting with you. Always appreciate it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.